Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to U.S. Home Talk. We are live every Wednesday, noon Central Standard Time, talking about mortgages, real estate, all the fun stuff here in the real estate world throughout the country. As always, you can find us at US Home Talk. That's the best, ushometalk.com. That's the best place to find us at any time during the week. You can also listen to our previous shows right at ushometalk.com as well. You can find previous shows on any platform that you use for your podcast. So iTunes, Spotify, any of those particular services, you can find us there as well. As always, on the show with me today is Marcus Walgrave with Hague Realtors and the South Dakota Home Team. We're going to be talking about 9 steps to follow when buying a house in 2025 here. Marcus, good to see you as always.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are we doing?
Doing pretty good. Can't complain. We also have Evan, who is the wizard of podcasts in the background here. He is also our insurance guru. He is in the background making sure our show sounds good, making sure Marcus looks good. Big filters over there. Yep. Getting the filters ready.
Got my hair done.
Get it all did up there. There he is. Okay. So, some housekeeping stuff. We have a hotline. We have a real estate hotline. So if you want to get a hold of us during the week via phone, or if you want to call or text during the show, you got some questions, or you want to interact with us during the show, that number is 612-234-7585. Again, 612-234-7585. You can also watch us live on Facebook. So we'll post this live on Facebook and there'll be a live feed there. If you have questions, you can just submit a question right through the comment section in Facebook Live, and we'll answer those questions live on air. So before we get into our topic again, which is going to be 9 steps to follow when buying a house in 2025, I'm going to talk about interest rates a little bit because today is somewhat of a big day. Marcus, Evan, do you guys know what's happening today? Take a guess
the Feds.
On the rates. The Feds meet today. Yep. So today and tomorrow, the minutes are going to come out tomorrow. So tomorrow is really the day where we could see maybe some movement in interest rates. So today's the meeting, tomorrow the minutes come out. And so our interest rates, if we look from the beginning of the year until now, our interest rates are lower. We came across the beginning of the year sitting about at 7%, and we're sitting closer to 6.5% as far as 30-year fix goes. So that's been a nice little drop since the beginning of the year. Hopefully the Feds give us some good news today and tomorrow, and maybe that kicks off a nice little run to where maybe rates, trickle down to 6.25. Maybe we see 6 1/8 or something like that coming up.
Now, Mike, right? Good news for rates usually means that maybe not the greatest news for economy.
Correct.
So
yes. So
if you're out there ready to buy or sell, that can be good news for you.
Yeah. So in general, what's bad for the economy is good for mortgage interest rates. So there's a little bit of give and take there, a little bit of a catch-22. You're going to win on one side, lose on the other. Typically when it comes to mortgages, the biggest purchase of your life, the biggest loan you're ever going to take out, the lower the interest rate on the largest loan you'll ever have in your life, that's typically the best route to go. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here over the next couple of days.
Mike, did you see any kind of like a forecasting on what they're talking about? It seemed like I came across a couple articles saying that the GDP slowed down a hair, and that was maybe going to grab the Fed's attention. Anything that you're kind of vibing?
From what I can tell, I don't think they're going to move them. I don't think they're going to move rates. They're certainly not going to raise them. If we get any sort of drop, it'd probably be like a drop by a quarter, maybe. But I don't think there's going to be a movement at this meeting. Now, I know Trump wants the Feds to lower interest rates, but they're going to be looking at inflation. That's the biggest marker, right? So it's like you can't start cutting the Fed's funds rate too soon, because if inflation comes back, the Yoda of real estate spoke about this, I think last week when he was on. Inflation
2 weeks ago. I missed it. I missed it.
2 weeks ago. Yeah. So he's like, inflation is kind of like a bad infection, right? You take your antibiotics, right? And you start wiping this thing out. Well, as soon as it goes away and you have a couple days left worth of antibiotics, you're like, wow, it's gone. So I'll just stop taking them. Right. Well, then all of a sudden it comes back, and it comes back even worse than when you had it the first time. That's what inflation does. If you start pulling back too soon and inflation starts coming back, it's like a runaway train that's, got even more momentum the second time around. So you got to be careful when it comes to inflation and pulling back too soon. So I know the Feds are really concerned about that. And so that's why I think they're going to slow play this meeting.
Did the Yoda ever kind of make any comments about if there's any correlation between like the quantitative easing and inflation? I mean, can you do one and it not affect the other, or are they pretty much one
Yeah.
and the same?
He didn't talk about how quantitative easing would affect inflation. I guess we didn't get into that there. I don't know if the two are really that correlated. I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of correlation between the two, but it's not like a direct deal where if we're going to do quantitative easing, which all that means is that the federal government is going to pump a bunch of money, a bunch of liquidity into the mortgage-backed securities market. That's going to make that market go up. When that market goes up and gets better, interest rates get better, right? So that would make our interest rates come down because interest rates would be getting better. So that's something that the government can do. But it takes money to do that. We're talking $500 million, dollars a month, has what they have done in the past, to say we're going to buy mortgage-backed securities at a tune of $500 million per month. And so it's big dollars. The government, if they do that, we could literally see interest rates go down a full percentage within a few months after that starts. But again, I'm sure that's all part of the equation. It's if we do this, what do we do over here? And how does that affect this over here? So they haven't had really any talks about the government doing that, the quantitative easing. Up to
You
this
just
point,
mentioned Trump, and it seemed like, that would be like the one card that he could maybe try to influence
right?
the Federal Reserve to do, is to, take that approach to bring down rates.
Yeah, you could do that, Marcus. You got 500 million laying around and want to pump it in there, just drop
every
rates
month,
for a little bit.
Every month. Got that Elon Musk money, huh?
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there with that. But I do think, moving throughout the rest of the year here, I think the slow trickle down, kind of what was I expecting at the beginning of the year. I think that's what's going to happen if we're at 6.5 today. Maybe we're at 6% flat in the fall, and maybe we hit the high fives by the end of the year. Something just, slow and steady like that is probably what I'm predicting is happening. So, but let's get into the topic of today. So the main topic we're going to talk about today is 9 steps to follow when buying a house in 2025. So we're going to talk about these steps here a little bit. We're going to talk about the order of these steps. Sometimes the order of these steps goes a little wonky, and we got to try to hold our clients on track here. But the very first step here that I put on the list is getting pre-approved for a mortgage. Right. So notice how I did not say that your first step is to contact a real estate agent. I said step number 1 is to get pre-approved for a mortgage. So I'm curious on your thoughts on this, Marcus. If you go to a real estate agent, so if you're not a cash buyer, right? If you're a cash buyer, some of this stuff is not going to pertain to you. You can skip getting pre-approved for a mortgage because you can just write a check for the house, right? But if you need to get a loan to buy a house, and you go to a real estate agent first, that's completely fine. You can do that. But then the agent's going to ask you, well, how much of a house can you afford? How much are you approved for? And that person's going to say, well, I don't know. And they're going to say, okay, we got to go find that out first.
Yeah, I agree, right? I mean, I think the first step is correct, because if you skip one and you go straight to 2, contact a real estate agent. A good real estate agent is going to ask you, okay, well, what have you been pre-approved for? And if they say, well, I haven't, then a good one's going to say, well, you should probably go do that first.
Right.
Because, it happens a lot, especially like first time home buyers, or maybe the second time that they purchase, they're not very experienced in the transaction. They've only, maybe done one home purchase in their life. And when you're trying to set up a strategic plan on how to achieve their goals, not knowing their budget, not necessarily even like what they can qualify for, but just simply having the conversation with a good mortgage banker and having, okay, I qualify for $4,000 a month mortgage, but it's not really what I want to do. I want to be closer to $3,000. Okay, well, what does $3,000 look like in terms of a purchase price with 5% down, 10% down, 20% down, whatever the case might be? It's hard to have that strategic plan to execute their goals without knowing numbers. And so, it's it's an important step to do very early in the phase.
Right. And one of the things a real estate agent doesn't want to do is set up a home search, at the wrong price point, or the wrong area, like for stuff that you're basically not looking for, right? That's just not a good
or can't
use
afford.
of time.
Like you go show them a home, in the 500 price range, and maybe they only qualify for 450, or they only want to be in the 450, and you went and looked at 2-3 homes at 500. Well, yes, there's beautiful homes at 450, but if you went and saw 500 and you're like, oh, I love what I see at 500, it's like, well, you
can't get that at 450.
You never could have got it, so we should have never been there in the first place, because now you're like having that like, oh man, the 450 is missing these things. But if you would have never gone and looked at something that you could have never afforded, you would have never looked at that 450 as like, we really wish I would have had that heated bathroom floor, that we saw at that $500,000 home. You can avoid those heartaches, really.
Right. Yeah. So the good first step is knowing your numbers. And one of the side notes I put in there is get your finances in order. That's something a good loan officer will help you do. Because a lot of people come to me and they're like, honestly, we don't even know what we can afford. Because one of the questions I ask always is, well, what do you want your monthly payment to be? And they're kind of like, well, we don't really know, like we want it to be. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, I'll show you kind of what the rules of thumb are, right? What the gold standard is in the mortgage industry as far as affordability goes. And then you guys can decide if that's something that, obviously fits your budget, or, you go up or down from there. Okay. So number one, of the 9 steps to follow when buying a house in 2025. So number 1 is get it pre-approved for a mortgage. Number 2, contact a real estate agent. Okay. So contact a real estate agent. Why would you want to contact a real estate agent, Marcus, when buying a house?
Well, I mean, they're the ones who are pounding the pavement, right, on a daily basis. They're going to know the market very well, the specific market that you're looking to, buy a home in, the market, what it looks like today. It looks different than what it did 3 months ago. And they're going to be able to come up with that strategic plan on how to find that home that you're looking for, that fits your finances, your budget. They're also going to be able to do the research on the homes as well, because you might have found a house that you really love, but having that conversation with your real estate agent, this might be a short-term move. And it's like, this house definitely checks your boxes, but this neighborhood just doesn't really appreciate very well year over year. So if you think you might sell in a couple of years, you might have to take a loss. So having that knowledge of what the current market is, understanding the neighborhoods and the subdivisions, having that research, a good real estate professional, a good realtor is going to be able to provide you with that information.
Yep, exactly. And so one of the things that comes to my mind too is, making sure you don't overpay for a house. A list, you got to remember, a list price is just what the seller would like to sell their house for. Doesn't necessarily mean that's the actual market value. There's plenty of sellers out there that are like, real estate agent might be like, look, the market says that you're going to sell your house for $450,000. They're like, well, let's go on at $500,000 and just see what happens. Right. So now you're 50 grand over, you as a buyer, you go in there, it's like, it's a nice house. Oh, 500,000. Okay. We're pre-approved for 500,000. That's what our loan officer said. So, okay. Yeah, we could buy this one, and real estate agents can be like, they're overpriced by 50 grand. Like, you shouldn't be paying 500 for that house. That market value on that one is 450.
Mike, you shared that story about a month back of that rock star realtor that you worked with on that new construction, right? I think you said it was like 2.25 is what it was listed at, 2.2 million or something of that, right in that range. Yeah. And the realtor's like grossly overpriced, even though that they could have been in a position to maybe buy it for just under 2. That's what they were financed for. And then I think as you shared the story, I think it was a number of months down the road, that property did end up closing, and it sold for like $1 million less than what it was on the market for. Right. And I mean, holy buckets, talk about value right there that realtor brought to their clients is incredible.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, saved them $1 million. Now, granted, they didn't buy that one, but if they would have, they would have paid $1 million more than what that market value was on that thing, because it eventually sold
because
for 1.3.
the house checked all the boxes for them.
Right. Yep.
And they were in a position where they could have if they wanted to buy it financially, But I mean, talk about way to save those clients from a horrible investment.
Right. The other thing too that I look at, another value add that a lot of people probably don't realize that real estate agents will do, is looking at resale. Like, what's your plan here? How long are you going to live there? One example that comes to mind is I had a real estate agent that was with some buyers that were looking at buying new construction, and the master bathroom had one sink. Didn't have it like a his and hers, only had one. And he's like, just so you know, resale on this is going to be tough, right? The number one thing you're going to get beat up on is that it doesn't have two sinks. It doesn't have a his and hers in there, right? It just has one sink. And the buyers are like, well, we've always used the same sink. Yeah, you know, as a married couple, it's like, oh, that's not even a big deal to us. Like, it doesn't even hit our radar. They ended up buying the home, ended up going to sell it, you know, 3 years down the road, same real estate agent, stuff like that. The number one feedback as to why people didn't want to pay the list price for it is it
One sink.
it had one sink in the master, you know, it came
Yeah, it's
up, you know, he
wild.
called it.
And again, you know, an experienced real estate agent is going to be able to have that knowledge. You know, they're going to have done so many transactions, hundreds of transactions, and listings as well. And so, you know, they just from past experiences representing buyers and sellers, you know, they knew that was going to come up. So, and the thing is like, as a buyer, you know, if just having the information is what's important. You know, you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. So but as long as you knew going into it that single vanity might cause a delay in the sale down the road, then it's like, well, whatever. We knew it. Our realtor told us about it. Don't really care. Can't add two sinks into it anyway, so it is what it is.
Yep. So step number 3. So step number 1 is get pre-approved for a mortgage. Step 2, contact a real estate agent. Step number 3, start touring homes, right? This is where the fun begins. This is where you get to go out, you know, your price range you should be looking in, you know, the type of neighborhoods and stuff like that you're looking for, the type of house, you know, how many bedrooms do we need? All that is set at this point. Now you get to go start looking at some homes.
Yeah, I mean, so touring homes is, do you need a real estate agent to tour homes? No. You can keep an eye on websites and check out to see what homes are going to have open houses, and just simply go view the open houses. I mean, I'll have clients all the time, you know, buyer clients that, you know, they'll call me or shoot me a message and be like, hey, you know, there's this one property that we're interested in, and there's an open house on Sunday. We're going to go take a look at it. And I always respond to them to, you know, feel free to, you know, however, if you want a private showing, you know, then let me know, because we can schedule private showings prior to those open houses and get you in there on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And the nice thing about that too is because sometimes those open houses, they're just busy. You know, there's a lot of people that can come through them, and you know, you kind of might be distracted by another couple's conversation over here, and then some kids maybe running around over here. So like, if you're truly serious about buying a home, I really believe that private showings, private tours are the way to go, and your realtor is going to be able to schedule those for you.
And then you can talk freely too without other people hearing you. You know, because you start going in there, you really like the house. It's like, oh, we really like this house. Like, you know,
Mike, actually, somewhat freely, right? I mean, now with the security systems,
right?
It seems like every house is hot. You know, every house has a mic.
They're all
every
listening.
house has a hot mic. So, you know, but yes, I mean, you can you know, you can point out the things that might be pros and cons, but as I always tell clients, mind your P's and Q's when you're in a house today.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, you know, so what my thought process going to, you're in an open house, you're like, hey, you know, then you can talk to like, hey, you know, it's like, God, we really like this house. We should offer them $5,000 over and see if they'll take it, you know, without, you know, and then stop all the rest of the open houses that they got planned. And then another couple like really likes it too. And it's like, oh, they're going 5,000 over. Well, let's go 6,000 over. You know what I mean? And you know, we'll just trump them by $1,000 to get it. You know what I mean? So it's like those types of conversations. You might be able to have a little bit more freely if you do a private showing, you know, with your real estate agent versus an open house.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, most definitely. And you know, or just simply a simple critique of a home. You know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, noticing something that, you know, doesn't really work for you and your needs for a house. You know, but in being able to convey that that concern or message to your realtor, and maybe you have the means to address that down the road, so be it. But yeah, you're definitely going to be able to have a better showing. You're going to be able to not feel rushed from one room to the other, and you're going to be able to communicate better with your realtor on whether the house works for you or what you would need to change to make it work.
So step number 4 now then, so we just toured the home. Step number 4 is now make an offer. And a couple of notes that I put on here, listen to your real estate agent, right? I think making an offer, this is where the real estate agent makes their money, right? This is where their value, their worth is. Because this agent is going to know, the true market value, right? How hot the property is, what's it going to take to get that property. So if you are in a property where it's freshly listed and there's been 20 showings in the last 3 days on it, right? There's going to be multiple offers coming in. We all know that with that much activity early on the listing, there's going to be a lot of showings and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, if you really like this house, if this one checks all your boxes, this is the one. Okay, what are you going to have to offer in order to get it? So this is where listening to your real estate agent, even though it might not be what you want to hear, it's going to be the truth, and it's going to put you in the best position to get your offer accepted by that seller.
Yeah, you kind of talk about how that's where the realtor shows their value. Negotiation is huge during a process. I mean, if you miss the negotiation by 5%, it doesn't seem like a big number, right? You're like, okay, well, maybe we underperformed by 5% on what a master negotiator could do. A realtor who's been in the business for 10, 20, 30 years. Yeah, I mean, on a $500,000 house, that could be 25 grand that you missed out on, that your realtor could have got and put that money back in your pocket. So, and it's not just like a sale price. There's so many other moving parts to negotiation. In terms of like being able to have a general idea of what new shingles are going to be, new windows, flooring, etc., cabinets, whatever it might be. A realtor being able to, in a sense, kind of give you an estimate of what these items are going to cost, and having that conversation, and then bringing that to the table through an offer, and having that realtor be able to negotiate your terms for you. A lot of value.
Absolutely. Close date. Every seller might have a different hot button. Some sellers, it might be just price. What's going to net us the highest dollar amount on this thing? Some sellers might want flexibility in the close date. Like an early close date, or close date that's pushed back further. Your real estate agent, your experienced real estate agent, will talk to the other agent and say, what's important to your seller? You know what I mean? Can we accommodate what's important to your seller? And that listing agent will say it. They want a flexible close date because here's what there is. They got a new house building. They're building a new house, and that's going to be their next house, and it's new construction. So they don't know exactly when it's going to be done. So to have flexibility in that close date is really important to them, right? So now you can go in with an offer, might not be the highest dollar amount offer that's on the table, but maybe it's the most flexible on the closing date, and that's going to make the seller's life easier. Maybe that's the difference maker why they go with yours versus a different one.
Yeah, and we talk about it on the show all the time about the reputation of your realtor and their team that they represent. I mean, Jason, and yourself, Mike, and myself. It's when you see deals come in and who is representing the other party, and you can convey that to the client, saying, hey, this team here, they do exceptional work. That's going to make everybody feel like, hey, we are going to be able to get to the finish line. And there's a lot of value in that too. A seller may take a lesser dollar amount. Again, it's not always about the purchase price. There's so many other moving parts to a real estate transaction. They may see something that has a lesser dollar value, but there's everything else has more value to it. And it could simply just be the team that's representing the buyer, and knowing a seller can say, hey, we have a lot of riding on this sale. We're moving. We have a big life change event coming up. We don't want to get 2 weeks outside of closing and then everything fall apart, and then we have to start all over, but we were already packed up and ready to move out. There's a lot of value in that in itself. So, yes. The team matters too.
Okay. So now you made your offer, you got it accepted. Now, next step is, after you get your offer accepted from the seller, now you got to send in your earnest money. Marcus, what is earnest money?
Well, Earnest money is, yeah, the best way I could explain it is you're kind of putting money where your mouth is. You're telling the seller, hey, we want to buy your home, and here's our offer, and we are going to put X amount of dollars down, and in a sense that's we're saying that this offer is good, and we're putting money down to back it up. In the event that some deal were to fall through, and possibly it fell through not because of a contingency, something to where the buyer would get their money back. Maybe a buyer got cold feet. A seller can say, okay, well, they brought X amount of dollars to the table, and we'll let this buyer out of a legally and binding contract if they'll forfeit the earnest money to us, because we lost time on the market. We lost opportunities to get it sold to other buyers, and there's going to be additional cost to get it back on the market, marketing, etc. So this earnest money can maybe cover the cost that it would for a seller to go back on the market. So, I mean, I feel like that's the best way to explain it. Just putting money where your mouth is.
Pretty much. Yep. I just tell all my buyers, look, it's your skin in the game up front, right? Because what the seller doesn't want, if you put no earnest money down and you go through the process, and then a week before closing, you're just like, I really don't want to buy this house anymore. Okay. You don't have any skin in the game. You get out with, scot-free, if you will. And now the seller has, damages, if you will, that they got to pay for in the back end. They got to get a cancellation signed by you before they can put their house back on the market and go find another buyer and go through the whole thing, right? So they want to know that you're serious about buying their house. So you put this earnest money down, which is your skin in the game, to say, I'm serious about buying your house. And just like Marcus said, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Here's, it's typically 1% of the purchase price. So $500,000 home, here's $5,000 I'm putting on the table that says that I'm serious about buying your house. Now, if you get through all the contingencies, right? So, there might be an appraisal contingency, there might be a financing contingency, whatever the case may be. But if you get far enough down the road and the buyer is like, we really don't want to buy this house anymore, the seller is going to keep your earnest money, right? So that's their payment for them keeping up their side of the contract and the buyer not. Are there safety nets along the way for the buyer in the purchase agreement that allows them to get their money back, their earnest money back? Yes, there is. And that's, again, another good real estate agent is going to say, here's the contingencies and here's the safety nets that are part of your purchase agreement. You have to make decisions by these dates on here. Otherwise, your earnest money is more than likely going to be forfeited to the seller if you back out.
Yeah, and just make sure you have the conversation with your realtor about what each state has. Like, in South Dakota, state law is probably different than in Minnesota. Earnest money is something to where when you do submit earnest money, it's going to be deposited. And that's kind of where Mike said the skin in the game, because that money isn't just going to be, that check isn't just held in a drawer. It will be deposited into an escrow account. And that's where it sits. But like in the state of South Dakota, even if the buyer was in the total wrong, and everybody knows that seller deserves that earnest money, state law in South Dakota states that both parties have to sign off on the release of it. So seller isn't just guaranteed to get it. The seller has to sign off on the release of earnest money form for that for the seller to receive that earnest money. But even if you did $0 earnest money, it's still a legally binding contract. There probably is some legal consequences. If you were to just back out for no reason, because there will be damages that the seller will likely take on, and if the seller wants to go after you for you backing out of a contract for no reason, you better be ready for it.
Yep. Okay, so now you got your earnest money in. Now you're going to schedule your home inspection. So if your purchase agreement, calls for a home inspection, you got that signed off on by the seller, and both parties agree that they're going to give you X amount of time to get your home inspection done. That's the next step. Get your home inspection done. Now you typically have, anywhere between 3 and 10 days maybe would be typical as far as the amount of days to get your inspection done. Any comments on that piece of it, Marcus?
Yeah, I think the big piece is that, if you had bought in 2020, 21, 22, and that maybe that was your first purchase, it was the dynamics of that moment in time in the real estate industry was, it was hard to get an offer accepted that was contingent upon a home inspection. And so, but in today's market, I know it is in the Sioux Empire, and from my understanding as well in the Twin Cities, home inspections are back to the norm, right? I mean, if an offer gets submitted, it's very likely that it's going to have a property inspection contingency on it. And just understanding kind of where that's at. And we had that conversation a couple weeks back about sellers doing pre-inspections, and until I think Jason made the comment about yes, sellers, even if you do a pre-inspection, buyers still may want to spend their own $500 or $600 and have their own inspector do it as well. Which whatever, it's not a big deal. Inspectors are third-party, unbiased opinion of the overall condition, so it shouldn't really matter whether it's coming from the selling side or the buying side. But yeah, home inspections are a contingency, and something that you'll likely see in an offer in today's market.
Yep. So then once your inspection is clear, so typically then your loan officer will pick the file back up and get the rest of the loan stuff done. Right? Because we want to make sure the home inspection is done, make sure nothing, big shows up on that inspection report. If there's some sort of like major foundation issue or some major issue with the roof or something, some buyers might back out because they don't want to deal with that particular issue that showed up on that house. So that's why typically lenders will just kind of put the file on pause and make sure that inspection clears first before you start moving the rest of the moving pieces forward. So the rest of the moving pieces on the lending side of things would be like ordering an appraisal, ordering the title, having the buyer lock down their home insurance, getting them any of the remaining documents that they need, if they need a fresh pay stubs or fresh bank statements or something like that. That would be the next step in the process, to work with your lender to finish up that loan process. And then we get any comments on that? I
was just gonna say, Mike, it's kind of like in the beginning of our show here today. 1 and 2 can get switched around from time to time, and that kind of goes with the 6 and 7. I know, Mike, you and your team do such a phenomenal job. If you had a buyer come in there and said, "Hey, Mike, how fast can you close a loan? If I found a house today, how fast can you close a loan? Can you do it in 24 calendar days? Can you do it in 18 calendar days?" I'm sure you get asked that, frequently. And in those situations, as long as the buyer knows, it's like, hey, as soon as we get one under contract, we can't wait till the appraisal's done. Or excuse me, we can't wait for the inspection to be done. We're gonna have to order that appraisal right away. And that's kind of, again, that whole team concept, having that experienced realtor representing that buyer, reach out to Mike, say, Mike, this house is dialed in. I mean, it looks like it's in exceptional condition. I feel like you can confidently move forward with that appraisal, and we're not going to, the deal's not going to fall apart because of the inspection, because it just looks like it's in an excellent condition. So that'll help too.
Yep. I'd say, I always tell people the fastest we can close is 11 calendar days, because it's impossible to close a loan any sooner than 8 business days because of the disclosure and waiting timeframe requirements that the government has in place. So it's impossible to do it earlier than 8 business days. So that's why I tell everyone 11 calendar days, because you're going to have a win weekend, between there, possibly 2. But yeah, you're right, Marcus. So and the reason why I typically wait on to order the appraisal is because the buyers have to pay for the appraisal up front. So as soon as we order it, they have to pay for it, right? I don't want a buyer to pay for an appraisal on a house that they're not going to buy anymore because something crazy comes up in the inspection. But if we have a close date coming up and it's like, look, we literally don't have time to wait. If you want to close on that date, we got to get these other moving parts moving forward. That's just one of the risks the buyer takes, is like, hey, I'm going to pay for this appraisal right now so that we can get that going. If I end up backing out of the deal, I just paid for an appraisal on a house that I'm not going to buy anymore.
Yep.
So,
and a property inspection.
So, but that happens, that's a safety net too. There's always, quote unquote risk. When you do anything, really, you invest in anything, there's
that's
risk.
Like a safe loss, right? If that's a
that's a
keeps
money
you from buying like a lemon and a money pit, which you could drop, tens of thousands of dollars into. It's like, well, okay, you ate $1,000, you took a little risk, didn't work out, no big deal. Move on.
Exactly. So in a home inspection, paying $500 for a home inspection, that gets you out of buying a house that had an inherent, $30,000, foundation issue, that you didn't know about. So you just spent $500 to save yourself $30,000 on the back end. I mean, that's well worth it all day long.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I mean, I'm not good with numbers, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty good. That's a good investment there.
Yeah,
a home inspection.
I think every month, we all probably look at it and be like, man, I can't believe how much I spent money on that fishing rod was, $500
Right.
fishing rod, like holy buckets. So
Right. Okay, so now we got the rest of the loan process done. Now we got the loan clear to close. Now we're gonna do the final walkthrough. So Marcus, what's the importance of a final walkthrough?
a final walkthrough, a lot of homes that you're going to be touring are going to be occupied, or possibly even staged if it's new construction. So you just want to make sure that the home that you saw during your private tour is the same home that you're going to be buying the next day or in a couple of days. You want to go in there, make sure that no damage happened during the move out. The appliances that were part of the purchase are still there. And what the condition of the home is in the same condition as it was when you saw it a month ago or whatever the case might be. So it's just kind of the safety net, making sure that nothing is wrong with it. And if something does come up, it doesn't mean it's a deal breaker. It just allows you that opportunity to say, hey, sellers, guys, the kitchen appliances were part of the deal. It says it in our contract. They're not there. So if you want us to buy it, we still want to buy the house, but you're going to have to compensate us for the appliances that you took out of the kitchen. We expect something the similar to same value, and then we'll move forward. If not, then the deal's off. So I think that's the big value of the final walkthrough. Not required in our state in the Sioux Empire. Highly recommended.
Yep, exactly. You want that condition to be the same. So for example, there could be one thing where maybe you toured a property in early March, right? And the closing was mid-April.
Great example. Yeah.
Right. And so now you get frost that's coming out of the ground. You get your spring showers, you get your spring rains and stuff like that. And so when you toured the house, maybe the basement wasn't wet at all. Maybe you had an unfinished basement, this and that. But now your final walkthrough in April, now that the frost is out of the ground, now that we've had a bunch of rain, maybe there's signs of moisture intrusion or something in that basement when you do your final walkthrough. Something like that could come up, to where it's like, okay, this isn't the same condition, that it was in when we did our initial showing on this thing. And so now you can address whatever pops up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. We are in a Four Seasons climate, right? And I thought where you were headed with this, Mike, was going to be the our pet landmines in the backyard. If it was,
that too. Okay.
Like, holy buckets, you guys got to get that cleaned up. We're not moving in until the backyard's cleaned up because you got 400 mines out there that we didn't see during the 12 inches of snow that was hiding it. So that's where I thought you were headed.
No, that's another good one too, though. So it doesn't have to be necessarily.
I like your example better.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be inside the house. It's the entire property, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Could be maybe a shed. Maybe there was like a detached shed that they bought, one of those ones you put up on yourself, the resin sheds or whatever. Maybe that was supposed to stay there as part of your contract, and maybe they took it down and they were taking it with them.
Yeah,
that could be another thing.
Play sets. That's kind of a thing that is usually addressed in the contract and something you want to keep an eye on.
Yep. All right, sweet. So we did our final walkthrough. Everything is exactly the same as it was when we saw it. Perfect. All right, we're going to closing. Now that's the next thing. Last step, we're going to closing. What do closings look like for you guys down there in the Sioux Empire now? Buyers and sellers sitting at the table, or is it kind of are they separate now?
The parties. I mean, the parties have always been separated since I've been in the business in the beginning of 2014. Buyers go first. They have to they got to bring the money to the table to buy a home. So they go first, and if they successfully sign their closing docs and paperwork and they finish their part, buyer and seller typically cross paths in the lobby, couple handshakes, couple high fives, couple keys exchanged, and maybe a note, garage door openers, things of that nature, and buyers take off and sellers sign their paperwork, and it's a done deal. It takes about for both parties to kind of execute the closing, maybe 45 minutes. Like I said, buyers go first. If there's a loan involved, probably 25 to 30 minutes for the buyer to do their paperwork, 10 to 15 for the seller, and it's all done within the hour. So it's pretty smooth. Very likely that everybody does it at the title company. It's not required in South Dakota. Buyers can sign remotely, sellers can sign remotely, pre-sign. Sellers can pre-sign as well. So, but typically that's kind of what we're seeing. Buyers show up first at the top of the hour, sellers follow at the bottom of the hour.
Yep. So here, when I first got in the business, and Jason probably say the same thing too, he's been, doing it. He's just as old as dirt is, so he's been doing it forever.
It's ancient.
Right. I got to take a jab at him because he's not on the show with us today. But, when we first kind of got in the business, it was like buyers and sellers got at the table together, right? And they're sitting across from a table, and the closer sending the loan stuff down to the buy side, and the sellers
so weird.
Don't have a whole lot to do. They're just watching the buyers sign all their loan docs and stuff. So they're just sitting there, and we're just kind of just chatting, and everyone's kind of just, okay, here we go. And then, then it comes to the seller side. So then the title company kind of pushes some stuff on the seller side, and they only have like a few docs, right? 5, 6, 7 pages assigned. So they're quick and easy and stuff. And then everyone's waiting at the table, just chatting while the title company makes copies of everyone's documents so they can send copies home with them of what they signed and all that. And then everyone leaves, once the title company gives everyone their copies and says, congratulations, and here's your keys, and here's the garage door openers and all that. In today's world, kind of like you were saying, Marcus, I can't remember the last closing, that we actually had buyer and seller together sitting at a table. Typically sellers are coming in a day or two before closing and pre-signing all their stuff. They just get their stuff out of the way. Title companies like, just pop in. If you're in the area, pop in. It's going to take 5, 6, 7 minutes to sign your stuff, and you can be done. And so on lunch break, or, they're taking their kids to sports or something, they just stop in there, they pop in, they sign it. Buyers then will come in on the actual day of closing, and sit down with the title company and kind of do their thing, 25 to 30 minutes probably to get all their stuff done, and then the deal's done. And buyer and seller a lot of times don't even see each other at closing anymore. So,
yeah. Yep. I think, I don't know if that practice is still happening where both parties sit at the table, but most transactions, Mike, both parties are warm and fuzzy at time of closing. Sellers happy they're selling, buyers are happy that they're buying. And,
right.
But that's not always the case.
Not always the case.
Talk about a strange situation when, maybe there's some turmoil on the selling side, even though the buyers are like ecstatic about it, or maybe maybe the buyers felt like they didn't get a good deal, so they're mad because they feel like they should have got it for less, and sellers are overly happy because they're like, "Woo, we sold that for $40,000 more than we thought we were going to."
Right.
So probably good to keep those two parties separated. They want to cross paths. Lobby's probably the best for that interaction.
Yep. Yeah, and I definitely have stories. I got stories where the sellers were going through a divorce, and it's like you try to put two people who own a house together going through a divorce in the same room at the same time, selling this house that they, own together forever. You talk about just setting up a disaster, just waiting to happen. Like, if you want to beat an uncomfortable situation, go sit in one of those closings. They should have done it like we do it today. Mr. Buyer comes in, signs his side. Mrs. Buyer or seller comes in, signs her side, right? Now you have 3 different, right? Mr. Seller comes in at one time, Mrs. Buyer comes in another time, and then the actual buyers come in and whatever. So,
yeah, divorce, death, major life events, job relocation. Clients who maybe, had their gave birth at home, and there's just a lot of like emotion into it. And so it's, I feel like each party should have their moment in privacy, right?
Right.
They should be able to express how they want to express and not feel like they have to hold back because of another party sitting there. So I like today's, however it was, I'm glad I missed it back in the day, back in you old dinosaurs,
right?
Having everybody sit together.
It's definitely better today, and it's quicker and it's easier. Technology makes everything quicker, easier. Now they don't, it's the old school way of doing it. Now is much better. Seeing both sides of it, there's no way anyone's going back, to putting both parties down at the same time.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So I'm in luck. I don't have to experience that, thankfully.
Yep. You're lucky. Well, that's our show today. If you guys have any questions for us or want to reach out to us throughout the week, go to ushometalk.com. or reach out to us on our real estate hotline, which is 612-234-7585. Again, for Marcus Walgrave, Hegg Realtors, and the South Dakota Home Team, and myself, Mike Overson at Luminate Bank. Appreciate you watching. We'll catch you next week.